Iron Man 2 is a flawed film by all means of the imagination. It is a film that has too much going on. Pacing is a bit weird. Characters are a bit strange. Plot lines, far too many to even name all of them. But is Iron Man 2 a bad movie? No. Is Iron Man 2 a flawed and messy film? Absolutely. And when people say Iron Man 2 is a bad film, I say, no, it's not a bad movie. If people say Iron Man 2 is a messy film with a lot of problems and convoluted at times, I would say absolutely. Iron Man 2 is a messy film. Characters don't really go anywhere and sequences just feel out of place in terms of tone. I would say absolutely. Iron Man 2 is not a bad film. Iron Man 2 is a very flawed film, and there is a difference between bad and flawed, or messy. Iron Man 2 is a movie that has a lot of good things, and I would even say some very great things in the film. It's just quite a bit of those good and great things are buried in the rubble of either very mediocre things or just some straight up bad things in this film. This film is not bad or great. I would say this film is good. Yes, I would straight up say that Iron Man 2, with confidence, Iron Man 2 is a good film. Not a perfect film, not a flawless masterpiece of cinema, but a good and enjoyable superhero film that dives into the character of Tony Stark and the people around him. And I think this is what Iron Man 2 does better than I think people give it credit for. Tony Stark is a very flawed human character throughout the entire MCU, but especially in films like Iron Man 2. He is dying, physically and mentally, but this character is dying. And the director, Jon Favreau, and Robert Downey Jr. understand how to show this character and his progression from the start of the film, from the character that just has all this fame and basically has anything, to the middle of the film when he's in his lowest point, to the end of the film where he has grown as a character. It's kind of the same arc as Iron Man 1. He starts out as this ignorant, doesn't care about people kind of guy and progresses into being a better person. But this film has a much more different, and in my opinion, a much more human arc for this character. Yes, is the arc reactor poison plot line extremely convenient when he can't find a cure, but then he automatically can? Yes, sure, it is very convenient, but in my opinion, it kind of works. I'm not going to say it fully works, it's not a perfect transition, but in my opinion, it's good enough where I can buy it. It's not a moment where I'm just rolling my eyes and being like, okay, this completely takes me out of it. Is it a perfect moment? No, it is not a perfect moment, but I definitely do think it's a moment that makes sense enough. But again, I understand why people don't like it, and I don't love that moment either. It kind of goes from, he can't find an element, but then he can. It's a bit contrived and just very cliched where, oh, this person can't find something that they need to help them, or in this case, keep them from dying, but then, oh, automatically they can. It's a bit contrived, but I don't hate it. And the character of Tony Stark in this film is completely unlikable. And when people say he's unlikable as a bad thing, I kind of get it. No, from the first film, he was not super likable, but even when he was not likable, he was still fun and charming, so he was still likable. And in this film, he's just straight up, to a lot of people, just completely unlikable. And I can understand. In some moments in this film, in a lot of instances in this film, he's just this complete and utter guy who just doesn't give a care in the world about him, or especially about the people around him. And he has to learn to not just care about himself, but for the most part, to care about the people around him, which is a different arc from the first film. In the beginning of the first film, Tony Stark just cared completely about himself, nobody else, and he gradually became to care about more than just himself. In this film, it starts about, he cares about other people, but he doesn't really care about himself. And by the end of the film, he tries to care about other people, but he also tries to care about himself. And I really do like that nicely arc, and I do enjoy that arc throughout this movie. And I can understand why people say he's not likable. Yes, for the lot of this film, he's just arguing with Pepper or just making totally illogical and just straight up bad decisions throughout the film. Yes, he is. But in my opinion, it works for this character's progression. Again, I understand if people don't like the way this character acts. It is extremely annoying, and just that we're with this unlikable character for this amount of time throughout this 2-hour film. I understand that. But for me, it's a nice character arc that is similar to the first one, but does enough different things where it doesn't feel like it's just completely boycotting the first one, like the first one's arc meant nothing. You can still feel the arc from the first film, but I think it's a nice arc from the first film moving into the second film. And that moves on to the characters around Tony, especially Pepper Potts. Pepper Potts in the first film was just this side character, somewhat love interest by the end of the film, but didn't really mean much. In this film, she's front and center in pretty much a lot of Tony Stark's less than good moment. She becomes CIO of the company, and by the end of the film, she declines that for stress reasons. That reason doesn't really make a lot of sense, that Tony is just unreliable and she's completely stressed about it. I get it, but I don't fully get it. I think it's a bit weird and it's a bit clunky the way they decide to do that. But Pepper in this film, in my opinion, this is just my straight up opinion, is a character that in the first film was just complete side character. Again, kind of love interest. She was good, she did what she needed to do. But in this film, she actually has a lot to do in this film. Again, becomes CIO, but she's basically the human part of the not so good elements of Tony Stark in this film, such as the party sequence. He's just completely thrashing the place, blowing up bottles, glass, whatever, and she tells him that he needs to stop the party. Pepper in this film, but mostly in this scene, is basically being Tony's conscience. Basically, your conscience basically telling you that you're not supposed to be doing this. This is immature of you. This is irresponsible of you. Just completely stop it. Pepper, in this moment, is being kind of like Tony's conscience, telling him that this is completely wrong, irresponsible, immature. You just need to stop this before it goes any further. And Tony may be listening to the moment and the advice at first, being like, alright, fine, party's over. And then completely thinking, nah, let's not end it. Let's make this the after party is being in 15 minutes, completely regarding what his conscience said, which is Pepper in this instance. So completely regarding what Pepper said, just being like, nah, doesn't matter, not registering with it a bit. And that's basically Tony throughout this entire film. There's a lot of arguments between Pepper and Tony throughout this entire film, which I know for some people is exhausting. And for me, I think there's a bit too many. I think if they would have trimmed a bit of the arguments and just made it more spread out, I think that would have been better. But for the most part, I understand what Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. were going for with these sequences. Pepper, in this film, is Tony Stark's conscience. Tony Stark's part of him that is still living in a sense, that is not dying either physically or mentally. And I think, in my opinion, Pepper is a lot better in this film than she is in the first film. This is one of the few things that, in my opinion, the sequel just does a bit better than the first film. Pepper in the first film was, again, fine, quirky, enjoyable, good character. But in this film, she has so much more to do personally for Tony and for Tony's character and for his character arc and basically being his conscience, which I really did like. And these elements and these overall moments between these two characters, I think, are just really great and, in my opinion, really grand. Let's talk about Don Cheadle as Rhodey. A lot of people just absolutely were like, we love the other Rhodey more. And why I like that actor, and I think he did a fine job, I do definitely think Don Cheadle does a better job with this character. He's more likable, in my opinion. He has better chemistry with Tony Stark, and he's basically the opposite of Pepper in this situation. In the first film, he was always there for Tony. He was always his friend, trying to do the best thing. And in this film, he thinks he's doing the right thing by giving the suit to the government and trying to help Tony not do this on his own. And by the end of the film, he realizes that he should have trusted Tony and what he was doing and his opinion, and he should have basically just trusted his friend. But that's the end of the film. If Pepper is the conscience to Tony, Rhodey is basically the enemy of Tony. In the sense that, yes, we have the actual enemies in these films, the quote-unquote villains, so to speak, for your comic book film, but in terms of an actual villain that is not technically a villain, to Tony, Rhodey, to him, is his enemy. He went from his friend, who had his back in pretty much any situation, to basically Rhodey thinking what he's doing is right, wanting to give the suit to the government, to the military, to kind of widen this Iron Man branch, so Tony is not by himself. But Tony thinks what he is doing, keeping the suits to himself, knowing that he can do this, in my opinion, makes these two quote-unquote enemies that much more relatable. And by the end of the film, Tony, realizing that he could use a quote-unquote sidekick, or a better term, could use a friend, in my opinion, is a perfect arc between these two characters. The first film, they were these friends, these go-lucky guys who would just do anything for each other, to the start of this film, where they basically start as that from the first film, but gradually turn into these enemies, these people who don't really get along anymore. These two characters have two different sides of the sticks, but basically thinking what they are doing is right. And to be honest, Tony isn't wrong for thinking what he thinks. And to be honest, Rhodey isn't wrong for thinking what he thinks. Is it necessarily the right thing to do? And should he have trusted his friend? Yes. But in my opinion, let's go back to Tony Stark, and I think he should have trusted his friend a bit more as well. He should have trusted his friend to handle the situation in a different way. They should have talked each other out, saying, hey, Tony, this is why I want to give this to the military. I think this will be good this way. And Tony, being the good friend that he is, could have explained, no, I think I should keep it. I can do it on my own in this way. But since Tony is so selfish throughout this entire film, and this is his arc to become not selfish, which is like the arc in the first film, but in this film, his arc is to be not selfish, but his main arc is to work with somebody else, to have a partner, to have a friend. And in my opinion, this is a much better friendship than in the first film, when it was just this almost, they bantered a bit, they disagreed a bit, but it was mostly this perfect friendship. In this film, it's a friendship that starts, I got your back, man, to the end of the line, to, this has gone too far, you need to give the suits, come on, we need, you need people's help, to the end of the film with being like, hey man, I should have trusted you. And Tony has the same arc. He starts as his character being like, dude, I got ya. Let's just do things together too. Dude, I don't want to give the suits. I think it's a bad memo. To the end of the film being like, I don't think we should give it to the military. But I could use a partner. I could use a friend. I could use somebody in the field to help me. I could use a friend. And throughout this entire film, Tony and Rhodey learn to basically not just be friends, but to be partners, to work together, to trust each other like they did in the first film. I think that's a brilliant arc, and that's why I think the Rhodey and Tony relationship is much stronger in this film than it is in that first film. Because it feels more real. Because it's a much more personal relationship. Let's talk about the villain. Whiplash in this film, the big whip guy, he has his motivation. Tony's father completely messed over his father. Let's butt heads. Okay, strong enough, but very similar to the Iron Patriot in the first film. Very similar to Obadiah in the first film. I think Obadiah is a much stronger villain in terms of performance and just in terms of villain, but they're very similar in terms of motivation in a way. In the first film, Obadiah hated Tony's new direction not to make weapons. He wanted the Iron Man suits. In this film, Whiplash wants an Iron Man suit. He wants revenge from Tony, from his father doing completely wrong to his family. So there's motivation there. And I don't think this is a bad performance. I don't think it's a bad character. I just think there's not much to him. I like the whips. The visual effects are pretty good. And I do enjoy this character. And I think Mickey Rourke does a very good job of what he's given. I just don't think what he's given is very good. I don't think what he's given is very compelling in a sense. And him and Armie Hammer is actually really fun. And I actually think Armie Hammer is a very good villain to Tony Stark. Whiplash is a very good villain to Iron Man. And there's a difference, let me explain. Whiplash is a very good physical force for Iron Man, Tony Stark in the suit, to punch around in the third act. Armie Hammer's character is a very good force and a quote-unquote villain for Tony Stark, the playboy billionaire character, to butt heads. And I think that works extremely well. And I really do enjoy that character. Justin Hammer is a character that wants to be like Tony Stark. He wants to be like Iron Man. He wants the gadgets. He wants the suits. He wants the fame. He wants the girls. He wants everything that Tony has. He wants. He has his own weapons company. But it stinks. It's just this paper-cut rip-off of Stark Industries weapons that Tony stopped making to help people. Justin Hammer is a character that wants to be like Tony so badly, but he doesn't get Tony's morals. He doesn't get Tony's... Basically, he doesn't get... He's basically what Tony Stark is in the first half of the first film. This ignorant, rich guy who just doesn't give a care of the world. He just wants to do what he wants to do. That's what Justin Hammer's character is in this film. And Sam Rockwell plays that perfectly. The character's annoying, just like Tony Stark was in the beginning of the first film. He's arrogant, just like Tony Stark was in the beginning of that first film. He doesn't know what to do with all this money, just like Tony Stark was in the first film. He is basically the exact person that Tony Stark's character was in the first film. And them going back and head, them butting heads banter-wise, just what they know is so evident in the courtroom scene in the beginning of the film. They're trying to show military footage about all these suits. Tony hacks it, and oh, look there. Justin Hammer's there. What gives? And he tries to turn off the machine, and he can't even turn off a TV. It's just because he's under this facade like he knows what he's talking about. But he doesn't. And that's what Tony was in the opening of the first film. He's this rich guy who was smart, but he didn't really know what he's talking about. This film, Tony is not just this guy that has a lot of money with a suit. it's very prominent that he knows what he is talking about. He actually has a brain. He actually uses it in this film, and is prominent in the race car fight scene. Whiplash is just whipping whips, and he sees there's oil dripping from the car, and if the whips hit the fire, it will explode the car. So he gets out of the way for Whiplash to swing that whip and to blow up the car to try to give him a diversion to try to get Tony to escape. He's smart. He's not just this rich, quippy guy who has a suit who just uses all his superhero isms to get out of situations. He's this smart guy. Justin Hammer is not this smart guy. He's not this super smart, intelligent guy. He makes absolutely cheap weapons. He basically throws tantrums if he doesn't get what he wants. And at times, that could be Tony Stark. He could be this very annoying, ignorant character. But the way the writers write him in these films, and the way Robert Downey Jr. plays him, rides this balance between being super ignorant, but being ignorant in a charming way. And I think Justin Hammer does not really ride that line. He's rich, he's famous, he's arrogant, but not in a charming way. He's just arrogant in a way that's just, he's arrogant. What are you going to do about it? And I think him being the villain for Tony Stark works in a really great way. And of course, he has just an amazing dance scene that everybody can agree is just amazing. Whiplash is a great villain for Iron Man to go up against. And especially in the race car fight, it's very improvident that Whiplash is just all about rage, and he's just whipping whips, and he's just going insane. But Tony actually took a time to think about what to do, and he beat him because of that. He used his smarts, he used his intelligence to beat him. He does that again later on at the very end of the film, where him and Rhodey put repulsor blasters that they learn later on in the film, makes this giant repulsor blast to stop Whiplash. Again, he used his smarts to defeat the villain. Whiplash thinks bigger is better. Let me just use all the rage, all the muscle, all the energy I can, and maybe I'll defeat him. If Tony Stark was not a smart guy, he easily could defeat him at the final act. Easily could have done it, hands down, could have done it super simple. But Tony, being the smart, intelligent guy he actually is, bested the villain. Because the villain necessarily didn't really use his intelligence, didn't really use his smarts that he has to defeat his enemy. He just used the rage, the anger, the overall brute strength that he has to try to defeat his quote-unquote enemy. I think that's why Justin Hammer is a great villain for Tony Stark, and that's why I think Whiplash is a pretty great villain for Iron Man. These are two different villains to go over two different sides of Tony Stark. The billionaire playboy that actually has deeper themes going into him, or Iron Man, the superhero who knows what he's doing. I think that really does give a more emotional weight to these villains. Let's talk about some of the more forced characters. Black Widow first up. Great introduction, great action scene in the hallway. Really fun character. Really enjoyed her introduction in the film. Did she really need to be in this film? Absolutely not. They could have removed all her sequences, and to be honest, you wouldn't have moved much. They could have, if they did not write her in this film, you would not miss anything. She has a cool action sequence. That's about it. You could have placed that with Happy, Tony, Rhodey, Pepper, anybody. I do like the character though. Nick Fury's in this film. I love Samuel Jackson, love the character of Nick Fury, but the way they shoehorned him in this film is so weird, it's so strange. The last time we saw him was in a brilliant in-credit scene at the end of the first Iron Man film. That was the first time we saw Nick Fury. Audiences just blew their mind, and the first time we see him in this film, The second time we've seen him in this entire universe, he just comes to Tony in broad daylight while he's on this giant donut, eating a donut, being like, yo, we need to talk about things. And it just feels so just abrupt and random. It's like they finished the script. Kevin Feige came to them and be like, oh wait, we need to put Nick Fury in the film. Is there a way you can write him in? And Jon Favreau was thinking, oh yes, let's just write him in. Let's just write this odd add-in diner sequence. Let's just shoehorn him in. And one of the producers were like, but shouldn't we set him in later on in the film and give him a better send-up? We don't have time. Let's just shoehorn in. And yes, I know this was a pretty rushed production compared to the first film, but I think they could have done a better job putting him in this film. And I don't think they did. I like the character, I love the performance, but I don't really think he needed to be in this film, and it just feels very weird. Let's talk about another major problem a lot of people, and me personally, have in this film. There is too many plot lines going on. There is so many plots going on in this film, and some of them go hand in hand, but some of them absolutely should not be in here and just feel like this film is absolutely stuffed with stuff. And by the end of the film, some of the plot lines don't even get resolved. Some of them either don't go completely nowhere, don't even get to finish, don't even get to start, or just get completely chopped off by the end of the film and be like, forget it, whatever. This is a 2-hour film, 2-hour and 4-minute film to be precise. There is not enough runtime to give all of these plot lines closure. You would have to make a 4-hour plus film to give all these plot lines the time that they need to make sense. But they don't. There's so many plot lines in this film that start, seem like they're going somewhere, boom, end completely, or just weirdly abrupt, or just weirdly end, or just weirdly get shoehorned in the third act. It just doesn't really work. There's too much stuff going on in this film that for me just doesn't work. I like this film, but I can definitely understand that there is just so much going on. There is so much filler. There's so much stuff going on in this film that it just weighs this film down from being actually great. I think if they down a lot of these plot lines or fix some of these plot lines, I think this film could actually have been really great. It has great characters, stellar action, which we'll talk about in a second, but there is just too much going on in terms of the plot. Alright, there's just too much plot lines. I wouldn't name them all, but we will be here all day. There's just too many plot lines, and I think they could have just got rid of a lot of them. Alright, let's talk about more things I like. The action, stellar. Really, really loved it. The end where Whiplash's head is just out of this Iron Man suit, it looks a bit weird, looks a bit shoddy, but for the most part, the finale where Rhodey and all the droids are chasing Tony when he's been hacked, exciting, brilliant, thrilling. And Kevin Feige has confirmed that the child that Tony Stark blows one of the droids with in front of is actually Peter Parker, which I just love that these universes so early on were connected. I know Kevin Feige can say all he wants. Yes, from 2010, we planned that Peter Parker would be in the film like 6 years later. Nope, you can't say that. Nope, that does not make any sense. You can say it is, but it doesn't. It's fun to know that now, but it was kind of like, well, this kid doesn't really have a personality, a name, a face. Let's just say it's Peter. I'm not saying it's not Peter. I like that it's Peter. I'm just saying if Kevin Feige said, oh, we planned that was Peter. Nope, you didn't. Unless you did. If you did, that is impressive stuff. But I highly doubt you did. But the finale, really exciting. Great visual effects, again, besides the make you work head out of the drawing Iron Man suit thing. Doesn't really work for me. But it's really well shot, really well edited. The Black Widow Hall-White fight, really exciting. The racetrack way, really fun. In the suitcase, briefcase armor, best design of an Iron Man suit, best sounding. It's an awesome suit. So overall, the action is really great. And I actually think in terms of finale, I think the action is just a bit better. in the second film. It has much more stakes. The stakes are higher. It's more exciting. And because of these characters and the relationship, as I've talked about, between Robert Downey Jr. and Don Cheadle, these characters can actually... It's rewarding when they beat him. Is it very, like, typical that these two characters are being in the exact same position where they could repulse or blast each other to get out of the situation? Absolutely. But it's stuff like that. If you just complain about that, you're just nitpicking. Actually do actual criticism. I'm all for actual criticisms. But if you're just nitpicking, it's just, for me, just like, what do you do with life? If you just absolutely just want to nitpick a film, like what are you doing with your life? It just doesn't work. The music, pretty great as well, and because this film was so rushed, besides all the plot lines, this film is actually much better than it should be. Like, I'm not saying it's great. There's too many stuff going on. There's some weird moments of humor and some weirdly edited sequences that don't really flow as well as they should, but for the most part, this film is a lot better than it should be for having such a rushed and just messy production. And Jon Favreau directs the absolute hell out of this film. This film looks amazing, and the direction, the shots, all of it absolutely works. This film looks visually great. The Iron Man suits, they feel heavy. I love the earlier Iron Man suits. They feel real. They have a weight to them. They have a sense of scale to them, which I really liked. And I talked about it in a video where I talked about the Iron Man suits. I really do enjoy how these suits feel in these earlier films. I just really enjoy that throughout these movies, how these suits feel. They feel real. They feel like they're heavy to them, even though there's one or two times where Tony will punch a civilian and I think they should just be dead, just blood on, just their face just blown off. But hey, I'm not the judge of anything. Overall, Iron Man 2 is a flawed film with quite a bit of problems, but it has some really sweet moments, especially between a moment where Tony watches the recording of his dad. Really sweet, really emotional, really like that. The villains are well thought out. The action sequence is great. The characters really well thought out. The relationship between Tony and Rhodey, I think, is better in the first film. Pepper, I think, is better in the first film. I think the finale is better in the first film. I don't think it's better than the first film, but I do think this film has a lot of great stuff. So those are my thoughts on Iron Man 2. What do you think of this film? Let us know all your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you guys like this video, hit the like button and subscribe and that post notification bell so that someone is checking back on my podcast I do every other Tuesday with a friend of mine. It's called the Movie Podcast. And just gonna check out my Instagram at JohnScoreDaniel77. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. General out.